On the 14th of February 2003, 7 bridges all across the United Kingdom, from Glasgow to Bristol, hosted a Valentine's meal that the participants will never forget. This is the story behind that remarkable evening. In September 2002, Dr. Oetker's UK marketing team started looking for a way to raise the profile of the Pizza Ristorante brand amongst British consumers for the new year, to bridge the gap between 2 runs of the TV ad. The team wanted an initial large PR event to launch the consumer campaign for Dr. Oetker and Pizza Ristorante that would complement the existing advertising and retailer promotions. Whatever the event was, it would need to link in with the brand's core values: quality, romance, variety, convenience, and adult appeal. Various options were considered and discounted. Some were too gimmicky, others not sufficiently different to attract the interest of journalists. The one idea that did have broad appeal was to recreate the TV advert all over the country, and this was the concept that was taken forward. Once the idea had been agreed, the next most important part of the idea was finding suitable bridges throughout the country on which we could stage the events. Given that the local media, broadcast and print, would play an integral role in the event's success, cities were chosen with high population densities and high readership and listenership figures for the media. Initially, a short list of 12 locations was drawn up, from which between 6 and 8 would be chosen to host the events. The organisers then started to look for bridges in each of the cities that fulfilled the criteria. Centrally located, with wide footpaths and sufficiently romantic for a meal there to have the right ambience. When all the bridges were identified, the team started to seek approval for holding the events on them, from the public authorities and private companies that owned them. Some bridges were given the go-ahead straight away, the aptly named Valentines footbridge in Bristol, for example, whilst others were impossible to get approval to use. Eventually, the final list of locations was drawn up: Glasgow, Newcastle, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol and Cardiff. Once the venues had been identified and approvals granted to use the bridge, then started the task of involving the media. The initial plan was to try to get radio stations to run a competition for listeners to win the romantic meal for 2, and this was successful in 5 of the 7 locations. Both commercial and BBC stations were approached to run the competition, but in all cases commercial stations proved too expensive, so the BBC option was taken.
Be knocking on your door with a telegram which says, on Valentine's night, tomorrow night, courtesy of us and Pizza Ristorante, you will be treated like a king and a queen up on top of Paradise Bridge. You got a poem?
I had just before on.
Yeah.
On BBC Radio Newcastle, so we've had so many calls and text messages and emails. It's an exclusive competition. You can only win this prize on the Julia Hankins Show. An alfresco romantic dinner to remember, courtesy of Pizza Ristorante.
We'll wait on you hand and foot. We'll supply the music, we'll supply the wine, we'll supply the dinner table. It's all courtesy of Pizza Ristorante and us, because we've linked up. And
For Glasgow, the Daily Record, Scotland's best-selling daily newspaper, ran a competition, whilst for the Leeds event, employees at supermarket Asda's head office were invited to put their names forward in the company's Valentine's Day draw. With the venues confirmed and the media on board, there then started the intensive process of finalising details. A company was approached to actually staff and stage the events in all locations, but there were still many issues for the Dr. Oetker team to resolve. It was important that all aspects of both Dr. Oetker and Pizza Ristorante corporate guidelines were followed. And this had an impact on everything, from the choice of menu to the branding on the marquees where the events were held. One problem in all sites was how to cook the pizza to perfection when there wasn't the facility to use a full oven. After lengthy research and much testing, a commercial pizza cooker was found which fitted the bill. It cooked pizzas perfectly in just 5 minutes and at a reasonable cost, so one could be bought for each venue. Given that the events needed to be well branded, much creativity went into creating appropriately branded materials for use at the event. Iron-on transfers were used to make branded table linen and serving cloths, whilst vinyl stickers were applied to soup plates to keep branding subtle but obvious. Local supermarkets were also approached to get involved. They supplied items for the events from pizzas to specially selected wine.
Given the complexities of what we're hoping to achieve, we wanted to run a trial event to understand the mechanics of how this event would take place, and to learn two key reasons for this. First is to get all the coordinators down, to run the event through and to learn how the event would take place throughout the whole day, and also to take publicity shots which could be used for media publications for getting extra publicity prior to the event taking place. We chose the Valentine footbridge in Bristol for the trial. The management company that owned the venue had been particularly helpful, and we knew that it would be the typical sort of bridge in terms of size, location and susceptibility to assorted weather conditions. The trial event took place in January. We assembled all the equipment we would need for the real thing, from the gazebo to the candle on the table, and all the people that would be running the events across all the venues. The trial was a success, running fairly smoothly despite the low temperatures, wind and occasional rain. However, it also highlighted areas where more rehearsal would be required, for example in cooking the pizzas to perfection. A full debrief document was prepared and circulated to all event staff a fortnight before the real Valentine's Day event took place. There was a cost implication, effectively the equivalent to running an 8th event, but this was good value for money as a way of making sure that the events themselves went without a hitch.
Finally, Valentine's Day arrived. All of the couples had been identified, the organisation teams were ready in all 7 venues, and the event began. Despite sub-zero temperatures in all venues, the couples arrived on time and were welcomed, then wined and dined by the 7 Ristorante teams. After having photographs taken for post-event publicity, the couples were left on their own to enjoy a 4-course meal. The main course, pizza ristorante, of course. There was even added entertainment for the couples to enjoy, an Italian opera singer to serenade them whilst they ate.
Vincerò, vincerò, vincerò.
As planned, before the Valentine's Day event actually took place, over 2.2 million people had already heard about the event, whether hearing about the competition on the radio or reading about it in the press or on the internet. On Saturday morning, after the event, over 100 news releases were emailed out, each with a photograph of the local couple who had enjoyed the evening, to the regional media covering each of the venues.
Pensier